how would Zion Williamson watch that playoff series and not want to be on that team next year? There's no good excuse, because what team could he go to that is
Right.
better? If you add a peak Zion Williamson in shape to that roster, that's a roster that could contend in the Western Conference. That team
Yeah.
could have beaten Phoenix if Zion was healthy and actually in shape. What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court for today, Monday, May 2nd. Jeff, it's May. It's
It is.
basketball season. It's the NBA playoffs, man. It's the best time of the year. How are you doing, my guy?
Oh, I'm doing great. I mean, listen, the NFL draft, it was fun, but listen, guys, now we're on to the NBA. The lottery's coming up. The playoffs are on. The
Mm-hmm.
draft is in really about a month, a little over.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited, man. A lot
Yeah,
coming up.
absolutely. Corey Woods will be coming on the Pizza Palace this week to talk about the Lions NFL draft. Beat writer from Forward Sports. I'll be coming on Friday. Be sure to check that out for all the coverage. Jeff, you freaking killed it on the stream, man. I was really proud of you as a friend and just as you know, a partner in crime. And makes me excited because, ladies and gents, for the NBA draft, Jeff and I will be part of the Woodward Sports NBA draft stream. There will be more details soon to come. We will also be on an NBA lottery stream as well. So lots of content coming your way. But first, Jeff, before we get to the lottery, before we get to the draft, I think it's important we have a conversation, because right now we're watching a lot of playoff basketball, which, by the way, one of the best playoffs in years. Like, just the start of it has been insane.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, when looking at these teams, I can't help but wonder what team the Pistons should be remodeling after. Now, the obvious answer is the team that wins the championship, right? But I think that's one thing to look at how a team is built in the interim, and then how some of these teams are built for the long term. And Jeff, you've been talking about this a little bit on Woodward Sports. You and I have kind of been talking about this together, just kind of behind the scenes for a while. And so now I kind of wanted to bring that to the surface. I want to ask you, Jeff, if there is a team in the NBA playoffs that you would like the Detroit Pistons to model their rebuild after, who would it be and why?
Well, I'll give my answer, and what team reminds me of what the Pistons can be, and that'll be the Memphis Grizzlies for a couple of reasons. Number one, when they kind of got over the whole grit and grind years with Mike Conley and the whole crew, Zebo, and they kind of moved to more of a younger lineup, and they hired Zach Kleiman, their GM right now, and he came in and he wanted to establish culture. And that was big for him. So they went out, they drafted Dylan Brooks in the second round of, I believe, the 2017 draft. And ever since then, they just built drafted more foundational pieces. They got Jaren Jackson Jr. the following year, Ja Morant, Desmond Bane the following year, along with Brandon Clark. I mean, these guys all are playing right now, big minutes for Memphis in a playoff series.
Well, when Jaren Jackson doesn't get 6 fouls in 10 minutes.
That's no, listen, they got some things. And honestly, if you watch the game one day against Golden State, you could just see the youth. Like it's catching up to them. But they remind me so much of what the Pistons are building for a multitude of reasons. Number one, Zach Kleiman said it himself. When they drafted Ja Morant, he reminds me a lot of that Cade move. They took him number 2 overall. Obviously, they both play the point guard position. But more than that, Zach Kleiman speaks on his leadership ability. And that's something that Cade Cunningham, obviously, he gets credited for the most. And you need a guy like that, especially in the NBA. You draft a franchise player like Ja Morant or Cade Cunningham, and you surround them with pieces. And if you have a GM that can recognize talent as well as Troy Weaver, you can find your Desmond Banes. You can find your Jaren Jacksons. You can find your Brandon Clarks and Dylan Brooks. What they were able to do, and I understand one thing that isn't like the Pistons and it's very different, they went through a couple head coaches, and they had David Fitzdale, which when they fired him, I was not a fan of it. I like David Fitzdale. They brought in Bickerstaff, had him for 2 seasons, fired him, and now they have Taylor Jenkins. And over the last couple of seasons, you've seen that progressional growth with him. Now, we love Dwayne Casey, and I think that's going to be the coach that we ultimately see leading this team into the playoffs and farther, down the road. So they had to go get their coach. I'm assuming the Pistons have their coach right now.
At least for now. I would imagine. For now. Yeah, I could very much imagine. Dwayne Casey being the Mark Jackson, and not being the Mark Jackson where he's let go. But again, he is the second oldest coach in the NBA actively, and just reality. The reality is that Dwayne Casey very well might not want to be coaching much longer. I mean, he could just want to move into a front office role. So you never know what happens. So,
yeah,
but he won't be fired. He won't be fired.
And one thing about Taylor Jenkins as well is his first 2 seasons with the Memphis Grizzlies, they didn't win more than 40 games. So
Mhm.
if you just took those two sample sizes and looked at Taylor Jenkins, you'd be like, can this guy coach? And then the
Right.
following year, they almost win 60. So that's right there how they built their team. Number one, through the draft, but going out and trading for, they had Valanciunas, got rid of him, brought in Steven Adams. Yep, they surrounded their young, really, I mean, extremely, I mean, franchise players with experience, with guys that can come in and contribute. So I think that's a team that probably comes to mind immediately when I think of what the Pistons can be. You have Cade, you go out this year, you draft another, hopefully top 3, top 4 guy who can
Mhm.
be, that young, another franchise player. You already have some already on the team, Sadiq Bey, Isaiah Stewart, some other guys that can already fill in different roles. Then you go out, spend money, you get a couple veterans. That's a comparison I like a whole lot. I mean, Memphis, they won as many games as they did this year. No one expected them to. I mean, if you look at the before the season's over unders, they beat them all in terms of
Yeah.
win totals on the over. So that's the team that I think of the most, honestly. And it has to do with the youth, obviously. You could talk
Yeah.
about the Boston Celtics, but the Boston Celtics, what's hard for me is, yes, they built that team through the draft with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But the last 3 out of the 4 years, they've been in the Eastern Conference Finals. So they've been close. I think they're a lot more ahead of the curve than the Pistons. So when I think of what team relates the most, it has to be the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of comparisons there, especially because Memphis is a very similar culture to Detroit, how it's very much a grit and grind built on defense, not really have many big stars in their past. I
Not a
mean,
big
one of the
market.
most like one of the most beloved players of all time is Zach Randolph. That speaks to the type of city that they have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when and that's a great comparison. For me though, there's 2 teams I look at in this playoffs, and I would say if there's 2 teams I want us to like head in that type of direction. First, I'm going to see the Phoenix Suns. Now, the reason why I say Phoenix, I think it's a very similar built team to the Memphis Grizzlies as far as like what they are building,
Yeah.
except I think Phoenix, I think they have a little bit more of a complete picture to what you want to look at. Like they have done the steps that Memphis is yet to do. They have gone and gotten the star to pair with their franchise guy, which I don't think Memphis has done yet. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is a worthy like star, but I think ideally he's the number 3 on a championship team, but I wonder who they bring in. Like maybe a Bradley Beal would be interested to play alongside of John Morant, and they have like an explosive backcourt with that rim protector. Maybe they do something like that. But if you look at Phoenix, you get that guy who is that second ball handler, that creator for others, a guy who knows how to win, a veteran that can help this team go to the next step, right? And I would imagine Detroit in the next couple of years is going to make a trade. They're going to make a move. Troy Weaver, when it's time to cash in, how aggressive he's been in the draft and just in the rebuilding process, he sure as hell is going to be aggressive when it comes to the trading market and free agency and trying to get moves done. And on top of that, you look at the front office and you look at the type of change that James Jones has brought in and the type of stability that Monty Williams has been, kind of like the guy that's helped this team develop and get along, has kind of been the perfect voice for that locker room. And then Devin Booker, he's the star that gets it done on both ends. He's the guy that, a lot of people talk about Devin Booker scoring, but it's really also his playmaking and his defense that has made him a different level superstar. That's what made him go from just an all-star guy who can get you 30 points a game, doesn't really affect winning, to, the Phoenix Suns are the best team in the Western Conference.
Right.
So I think that's one team I look at. And then a sleeper team that I think a lot of people need to talk about. And I think I need to give some apologies to David Griffin and everything that's going on over New Orleans, because the New Orleans Pelicans, they have a lot of talent on their roster, man. I mean, just look at, not only is it just, guys like Jose Alvarado, guys like Herb Jones on the defensive end, who's an absolute
Can't forget Herb Jones.
Dude, like they just, like looking at what they have, the New Orleans Pelicans, I thought going into this season that everything was not looking good there. But how would Zion Williamson watch that playoff series and not want to be on that team next year? There's no good excuse, because what team could he go to that is better? If you add a peak Zion Williamson in shape to that roster, that's a roster that could contend in the Western Conference. That team could have beaten Phoenix if Zion was healthy and actually in shape.
Yeah. And he said that's why Zion said it himself. They asked him. He said, "I'd sign, right now if I could." And partially that probably is due to the market. Look around the league. I don't know who would be collaborating and throwing a deal around for Zion for a
Mhm.
ton of whatever the Pelicans would be asking for. But a lot of that has to do with the team he has. Like, look at everything you just said. Look what they have in New Orleans. CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Valanciunas. They bring in Zion, Herb Jones, Alvarado. They have a crew over there. So,
Yeah,
I
even
mean,
Larry Nance Jr., a
yeah,
guy
they
who
got pieces.
Yeah, a guy who, over the past couple of years hasn't really found that fit, but now he's in a system that fits and he has a role that works for him. And even guys like Jonas Valanciunas, who was overlooked and was traded from Toronto to get, to get Marcus Gasol, who was the difference maker between Toronto being like a good team in the East and then ultimately the champion that they became. But Valanciunas with his 3-point shot is arguably the most valuable he's
Yeah.
been, but they can protect the rim. They have long athletic players. And again, I just keep stressing, Adam Beydoun, draft the cocaine, suck my dick. But also on top of that, like the cocaine in the NBA, man, when I'm looking at what you want to get, long, versatile wings and defenders that can switch on multiple positions. Those are the guys you want. We want to get long and athletic, and we need guys that can first defend every area of the floor. That's why the Boston Celtics have been as terrifying as they've been. And that's another area where we can be like them too. We just need to get long and athletic. That's why guys like Killian Hayes have a place on this roster going forward, because you look at what Toronto almost pulled off in that series against Philly just because of that positionless forward lineup. We got to be long and athletic and good on the defensive end, man. That's got to be the focus.
That's how teams are going to kill you nowadays. I mean, they'll go small
Yeah.
on you. Look at the best of the teams in the best teams in the NBA. Look at Golden State. Look at Phoenix. These teams can all go small. So what the Pistons are building, that's why I love Troy Weaver and his mentality and how he looks at the game. Like he sees that and he sees where the league going. He's like, hey, if we can get 5 guys that are just versatile, athletic, can guard multiple positions, that's how you win in the NBA.
Yeah, 100%. People talk about offense, and that's like what's been the thing, like the evolution of the 3-point shots, what's been the difference between these teams being championships. Maybe that's what the Warriors roster was. But if you look at what was consistent for those Warriors rosters, and then you look at the Suns and the Bucks last year, the teams that have been the most dominant, the teams that have been the best in this league over the past decade, over the past few years, have always been great defensive teams. The reason why the Brooklyn Nets couldn't do a damn thing against the Boston Celtics is that they literally couldn't stop a running nose. That's why. You need to defend in this league. That's what it comes down to.
And you got to be able to hit jump shots too.
Yep.
Like look at Phoenix. Like they got multiple guys who can hit jumpers. Even going back to Toronto, they had Kawhi Leonard who can go get you a bucket. And then you have Golden State. Obviously, we don't even got to talk about Golden State and what they got, the arsenal they got over there. So that's why it's versatility, number one, and your ability to guard multiple positions. That's why I always preach shooting, because with guys like Ja Morant or whoever it is, such great playmakers. You need guys around him that can shoot the basketball. That's why, Devin Booker, you're starting to see more of what he can do as a playmaker, because it's not only him that could shoot. They got Michael, even Jay Crowder, guys that can hit spot up threes. So Cam Johnson, can't forget about Cam Johnson. He's hitting at a high rate. So that's really the success in the NBA. That's the recipe.
Yeah,
it really
3
is.
and D, man. 3 and D. That's where we're at right now, man. And that's and you look at these rosters, like if you go down the list of the length of these guys, really. You have 3 players on the roster that are about 6'1", 6'3", and then it's like a ton of guys who are 6'7", 6'8", 6'7", 6'8", 6'10", 6'11", 6'8". It's like it's all these long, lanky guys that can just defend everywhere on the court, man. But the question is, what do you think? What team do you want us model our rebuild after? Please do not say Brooklyn in the comments section down below. But also be sure that you're clicking that subscribe button. We are close to 1,000 subscribers.
We got to get there.
We need to get there by the end of the playoffs. They ain't got it. We want to get there, and you're going to be the ones to do it. We want to thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time from Half Court. Be sure to subscribe.